for educational critical review and reaction is the late, great Jordan Maxwell.
I have my own ideas about what the colored eggs mean, but I'd like you to break it down, though, and let's begin there, if you don't mind.
Well, let's begin. What do you think the colored eggs represent?
Well, they're certainly a symbol of fertility, and this is at the same time when various pagan belief systems, same time of year, Easter, when springtime would come to the northern hemisphere again. Where fertility was much in the practices,
in the picture, and all the plants begin to grow, all the animals begin to reproduce, and then later on they're having their young and they grow, and as spring grows into summer, the animals have all reproduced. Everything that's alive is reproducing. And there's so much color, all the flowers and plants and trees and color is everywhere, especially with flowers around the northern hemisphere. You got the beautiful, beautiful flowers. And so the color is very big with spring. There's no color period. In winter, it's just frozen. But in spring, it's very colorful with all the plants and the animals and the different color, animals that we have. And they're all reproducing, coming up with new offspring. Mm-hmm. And so this is why the animals come out in the spring, because it's getting warm and life is changing. Life is coming back to the northern hemisphere. Right. And so that's why even we humans, we start thinking the same way. That's why we have spring weddings. Because we're getting ready to reproduce again. We didn't have enough babies and enough people. We're going to reproduce again. So now we're getting spring weddings, and the humans are going to get together, and it's going to be very colorful. And so that's why you have the eggs, because the egg represents the reproduction of life. Mm. And actually, if you go back to the old Phoenician Canaanites, thousands of years ago, there was a goddess that was connected with the worship of the lights and spring and the coming back to life, and she held in her arms a rabbit, and the rabbit always represented fertility. It represented the continual reproduction of life, because rabbits are always reproducing, and so that's why the rabbit became important even thousands of years ago in the symbolism. Because the rabbit represented an animal that just reproduces without stop. And so the rabbit becomes important back in 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, back in the ancient world of Phoenicia, Cana, where we call today Israel, in that area of the world. There was actually a goddess in spring, and she was carrying a rabbit. And the rabbit was carrying an egg. And so this is the idea behind the Easter egg. The egg represents fertility, and that's when the animals and plants and everything else begins to reproduce itself when the sun comes back to the northern hemisphere in spring. And so what causes that to happen is that the sun, which was dead for 3 days in winter, is gone down south, is dead to us in the northern hemisphere, is dead. And so when it comes back, it starts its annual journey on December 25th. It starts its annual journey back to the northern hemisphere. And 3 months later, 90 degrees and 90 days later, it has come back to the northern hemisphere, and officially, 90 days later, it officially crosses over the equator. Coming back to the northern hemisphere, it actually crosses our equator. And so that time was very special to the ancient people, because it represented life coming back to the northern hemisphere. All the plants are going to begin to grow, etc. And so,
Well, this is a practical matter because, first of all, there's a lot of agrarian societies at that point which depended on their agriculture. So what did you do? You stored things for the winter because nothing was going to grow, number one. So you had to know that this was the time when the earth was going to soften up again. It wasn't going to be hard. It was going to be fertile, and useful. That's to right. Plant a seed again, to plant seeds, to plant a seed, whatever. But also, the idea that all the colors are on the eggs. The reason why the colors are there is because in a literal sense during spring, this is when colors would emerge directly because what happens? Flowers bloom. Very practical. Again, flowers bloom.
That's what I said. The flowers are all representing beautiful colors.
Right.
And
they
it
provide
all
variety.
Represents the coming back of life.
Right.
Life was coming back in the northern hemisphere. All the birds are reproducing, the animals are reproducing, the beautiful flowers, all kinds of just hundreds of thousands of beautiful flowers coming back to life in the spring. And so it's a big celebration for life coming back to the earth. But Jesus said he would come back. And Jesus is God's Son, the light of the world. So the Son is coming back. He is coming back to bring life to the world. And as I said last week, the Egyptians understood that the sun was pure energy. Pure energy. And so energy is life. And the sun was life itself. It was the progenitor of energy. So it was life itself. And the ancient people said that if the sun were to be stingy and keep its energy and not share it with us, the sun would ultimately last forever because it's energy and energy is life. But the sun, for some reason, decided to share his energy with us. And so therefore God's Son is dying because the sun is giving his energy up for us continually. And obviously he's going to run out of energy one day. It may be billions of years, but he's going to run out of energy one day. And the sun is a star, and the star will die. And so therefore the ancient people said that God's Son, the light of the world, the one we call Jesus, he was God's Son. He gave his life so that you might live. He died so that you might live. And the symbolism is the sun is dying each day because it's giving his energy away. And therefore he's going to die completely when he runs out of energy. But thank God he won't do that for a while. But the sun will die one day, so ultimately God's Son is dying and giving his life so that you might live. Very simple. Celebration of Easter is very interesting because in the really ancient world, we could go back to the very ancient world as far back as we can go, and spring was not always called Easter or spring. We didn't know it as spring or Easter. It was recorded that in the ancient world, they recognized this particular time of year, and they called it the marriage feast of the Lamb, the marriage feast of God. And they said that God's Son was with his mother, and they went to a marriage feast. And in the story in the Bible, Jesus goes to this marriage feast with his mother, Mary, M-A-R-I, not M-A-R-Y. Mary is a Virgo the Virgin, the constellation of Virgo. And so Jesus goes to this marriage feast, and we are told that his mother, when they ran out of wine, there were so many people there, the wine was gone very quickly. So the mother, Mary, goes and tells her son, Jesus, that the party has run out of wine. And she wants him to make wine for the people. So it says Jesus went out and he took the water, he got water and turned it into wine. That's a story in the Bible. It's not history, it's a symbolic story because that's what happens. Mother Mary is actually Mother Earth, Mother Nature. Mother Nature asked God's Son, the earth asked God's Son to draw water, which it does. It evaporates the oceans. It draws water. and the water becomes heavy and comes over and over the land, and it rains. That water that Jesus, or God's Son, has drawn is now pouring over. It's over the fields, and it's raining on the grapes, and the grapes we smash and make it into wine. So God's Son has changed water into wine. It's a symbolic story. The entire New Testament is a metaphor, a symbolic metaphor. And but men have made the story into something which is supposed to be legitimately history, when in point of fact there was no man who rose from the dead. There was no man who died and came back. No one is coming back to save us. Nobody. No one is coming back to save the human race. And when you die, you will not be going into heaven with God's Son to see your family. You're going into what is called in the Hebrew Sheol. Sheol. Sheol was a word for hell. So you're going into the common grave. And for you then, you will finally experience what we call the end of the world. That's right. You will finally experience what is called the end of the world, because it's the end of the world for you. Everybody else will be doing fine, but you're gone. So it's the end of the world for you. And that's why it's a very interesting story when you start looking at Christianity as a metaphor, a symbolic story of the war between light and darkness, between the good and evil. We give us Barabbas, give us the criminal. We don't want the truth and the light. We can't handle the truth. We want to hear what we're paying people to tell us. We want to hear what we want to hear. And so therefore, all the preachers around in North America and all the preachers in Christendom, they will tell the people what they want to hear, but they won't tell them too much, like an education. They're not going to tell them nothing that has anything to do with education or how to read and how to think. No, they're not going to do that. They're going to tell you what you want to hear about how wonderful heaven will be and how your family is there waiting for you in heaven with the Lord and all of that. It's a wonderful story, but it has no basis in fact whatsoever. And this is why I think what Rodney Dangerfield said was so clever, and it was really funny. But I think it was Rodney Dangerfield who said that faith, people who have faith is that wonderful quality that allows you to believe something you know is bullshit. And so that's exactly what I'm saying, that when you believe something, we call you a believer. I don't want to believe anything. I want to intellectually sit down at the library and read books on ancient theologies and religion and conceptual ideas and where they've come from, and spend 60 years looking at the subject of religion. And finally, I got what I wanted. I wanted to know, and now I know. But now I am now being made aware that you might as well talk to yourself. If you know what's going on, you might as well talk to yourself. Why? Because if you talk to other people, you're going to end up talking to yourself. Nobody's going to want to hear what you're saying. Yeah. Nobody's going to care what you're saying. You know, nobody wants to hear the real truth.
See, that's the interesting thing I've said a lot of times is that, you know what, if you really start to talk to people about a lot of the things you discover, you will wind up kind of lonely, because there just are not many people who want to hear the unvarnished truth.